Hi everyone, welcome. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. And thank you to BookPeople for hosting this event, best bookstore in the country. And certainly the kindest and most helpful employees. Please help BookPeople out and buy a lot of books from them if you can afford to, even if you already have copies. It's not too early to start your Christmas shopping. Also, thank you to the fine folks at SFK Press for choosing In Darkness, Texas as their 2018 novel contest winner, for all their help in getting the story in shape, and for publishing the book and setting up the event. If you don't mind, I'd like to read a few short excerpts first, then I'll make some remarks, and we can do an interactive Q&A. Last of all, I will autograph your books. Is that good? Okay, you should know that while the excerpts I'll be reading are relatively quiet ones, I chose these pieces because I don't have the acting skills to bring to life action scenes or scenes with a lot of characters speaking all at once. But there is plenty of action in the book. The train wreck, the solar pulse, an exploding house, the chasing of food thief, a shootout, a fist fight, laughter, silliness, romance, adultery, disease, and humor. In other words, the book is dramatic on many levels. And so, without further ado, I give you If Darkness, Texas, and Cranberries. Part 1, Chapter 1. No matter how desperately a mother loves you, she can only put up with so much. And so the day came when Mother Nature lashed out against us. I understood where nature was coming from. My family never listened to me either, which is why I didn't tell them about the guns I bought. The whole thing started with the train wreck. On a Friday in early October, the young adults of my family went to the Oklahoma-Texas game up in Dallas, a big football rivalry around here. They dragged my husband, Hank the Crank, along with them, leaving me in South Austin with my grandchildren. At the time, I was glad to see Hank go. He'd been making me crazy since he retired, hovering like a gnat, micromanaging my coffee making, griping at me for reading instead of waiting attentively for him to spout something terse. Lord, I needed a break from that man. The 3-day trip to Dallas seemed perfect. I wasn't a built-in babysitter type of grandma, and I only saw my 4 grandkids together as a group on birthdays and holidays. For weeks, I've been excited about spending a long weekend alone with them. A cruel trick sometimes, getting what you ask for. Okay, now short jump ahead to after dinner Friday evening, me and the kids are hanging out. Keno, 17, and Milo, 12, are playing tennis on the Wii. Tasha, 15, is lounging in the easy chair, texting her friends. And Maisie, who is 6, is playing with dolls on the floor. Bee sits back to savor her grandkids when a hideously loud crash bang rang through the night. My heart took a flying leap. A brilliant light flashed across the sky and lit up the room through the rattling windows. We all shot to our feet. Milo and Maisie screamed. "What the?" Tasha cried. "Holy shit," Keno shouted. I was too shaken to say a word. An ear-smashing roar and clang rose from the direction of the train tracks a few blocks away. I often heard loud bangs from those tracks, but this cacophonous crunch of metal on metal, coupled with an endless screech, sounded like a train wreck. To the frantic rumble of the unrelenting noise, the kids and I ran out the front door. A fireball shooting high above the tracks was so bright it nearly blinded me. It illuminated South Austin's tree-covered sprawl like a phalanx of Klieg lights at the Super Bowl. A great gust of heat slammed into us, filling my lungs with scorched air. I coughed and slapped at my head, thinking my hair might have caught fire, while I frantically counted my grandkids, half expecting to see them ablaze. Blinking fast, trying to clear remnants of white flame from my vision, I shouted, "Get in the house now!" Keno heard them inside. Neighbors also rushed out their doors to gape at the fire. We'd had so many fast-moving fires around Austin lately due to the drought. Whole neighborhoods catching flame in mere minutes. And at the crossing, I'd watched many trains pass bearing warnings. Hazard, flammable, poison. The head of our neighborhood watch, Jack Jeffers, jogged toward me beneath a cloud of smoke that looked green in the glare of the halogen streetlamps. A shower of sparks and embers rained down a block or two behind him. "Y'all better evacuate, B," he said. I looked him in the eye and swallowed. "On my way, Mr. Jeffers, thank you." He ran off, yelling to others along the block, "Please evacuate now. That fire could spread fast." I squinted toward the fire. I couldn't see much with so many trees in the way, although it looked like the fire was on the tracks and not the houses that sat nearer to us. But it could spread like wildfire. My old shaky heart lurked along inside me. I ordered myself to calm down. At least the rest of the family was 200 miles away in Dallas. That helped. But my grandchildren, God, how could I be calm and get them out of here if I was on the verge of a heart attack? It had been ages since I'd managed a bevy of kids in an emergency. "Put your shoes on," I said to the grandkids, who were staring out the window when I hurried back inside. "Grab the bags you brought with you and your jackets. Let's go for a ride." Excuse me. Okay, so now I'll jump ahead to chapter 7. After the train wreck, the family evacuated to a hotel. When they returned home almost 2 days later, a solar pulse struck and shut down all the power, phones, and cars. Bee took the kids to the house behind hers, her secret house on Mint Lane that was stocked with food and supplies to survive a disaster. They hid out in the cellar and figured out between them that, though they could have been hit by a nuclear electromagnetic pulse, an EMP, it was more likely they were hit by a solar pulse. After Bee leaves the cellar to find out that the neighborhood seems safe, she brings the kids back home and cooks them dinner on the barbecue grill. This next scene takes place the night after the solar pulse. Chapter 7. After the younger kids fell asleep, I took Tasha and Keno back to the Mint house to fill a wagon with water jugs, chamber pots, guns, ammo, and fire extinguishers. We crept home without flashlights in the eerie night that was filled with the smell of burned tires and who knew what. Through the upstairs window, we watched a fire burning yellow along the western horizon. It didn't look like a huge conflagration, but this drought-ridden place was a tinderbox. Kids, that's more than a fire over there. There's a yellow glow behind it, all the way across, as far as I can see. Keno and Tasha crowded up next to me at the window, making anxious sounds in their throats. We ran to the front window and saw the same glow to the north beyond the trees. "What is that?" I asked, though my breath had left me. "It's how I always imagined the northern lights would look, except it's all around us." "I'll Google it," Keno said, then he slumped. Guess I can't." "Damn," Tasha said. "It could be a glow from the geomagnetic storm," Keno said, and his breathing sped up. I whirled around to face him. "What do you mean?" "Back in the 1800s, the sun took out all the telegraph lines once, back before electric lines." "I think I heard of that." The sky all over the planet lit up with colors, like the strongest northern lights ever seen, except it was in Australia too. He ran his hands along his scalp beneath his hair, like he was fixing to squeeze his head. Tasha grabbed hold of my arm. I'm scared. I pulled the trembling girl close. I know. Okay, Keno said, pacing in a circle. Our sky isn't as bright as that. That was a total geomagnetic storm. I don't think it killed anyone. This doesn't seem as strong as that. There aren't bright colors all over the sky, right? Good, I said, releasing a breath. I hugged Tasha hard. Don't worry. I was trying to be comforting, though I needed comfort myself. I pulled the chair in front of the big front window and sat down to study the yellow glow that rose and fell as though it was breathing. The kids stood watching with me, all of us seeming to breathe in time with the undulations of the glowing pulses of light. Have you had enough reading, or do you want me to read one more? Thank you. Gosh, you guys are great. Okay. Last, I'm going to jump ahead quite a ways to chapter 17. But first, I'll catch you up a bit. Bee's husband and her grown kids, the parents of her grandchildren among them, have not returned home. They were last heard from on I-35 just north of Waco, minutes before the solar EMP. Bee has a wind-up radio that can capture AM, FM, and 7 shortwave bands. You can buy them from the Red Cross, by the way. For weeks, she didn't find a single broadcast. Then she finally found one lone guy named Rick broadcasting on a shortwave band from Clifton, Texas, 30 miles west of Waco. This next scene takes place about 5 weeks after the solar eclipse. Every night, I listened to the shortwave and worried about my missing family. Rick said lots of his neighbors around Clifton had water wells, but the electric pumps weren't working. Hand pumps had fallen to rust, so only a few good pumps remained. Still, they owned chickens and goats, horses and cattle, hogs and milk cows, and they had gardens and fields full of crops. A lot of them owned old farm equipment, plows and reapers and such that could be pulled by horses, but they were short on the kinds of horses they needed for such heavy work. And the people weren't used to that sort of hard labor either. They, same as city folks, were accustomed to comforts like milking machines or tractors and harvesters with air-conditioned cabs. Yet some had old tractors that still ran as long as they could find diesel fuel, and they had water in creeks and ponds, even stocked ponds full of catfish. God, catfish. I tried to listen to everything Rick said. I didn't want to miss a thing, but whenever I stopped bustling about, I welled up with grief and pictured Hank's face, or I envisioned my 2 daughters as tiny girls running down the street, carrying helium balloons and laughing. I saw my 3 stepsons lined up for a photo, making devil horns behind each other's heads. It was about to break me, this grief. Finally, after I'd listened for several nights straight, Rick talked about Waco. Like I told y'all the first time I broadcast, there was an awful bad wreck over on I-35 in Waco when this thing happened. A tanker truck exploded. We saw the fireball all the way over here in Clifton, 30 miles away. They had to carry hurt people to hospitals, and it wasn't easy, believe you me. The hospitals didn't have power, and they ran out of water and medicine real fast. I don't know what happened to all those hurt people. I figure a bunch of them probably died. Dan cried shame. We think my Uncle Dave was one of them because he went to Waco that day, and none of us have heard from him since. I didn't realize how much I was crying listening to this until I put my hand to my chest and discovered that my shirt was wet. I did not tell my grandchildren about the wreck on the highway near Waco.